Now, some critics believe former President Jacob Zuma is likely to be barred from taking up his seat in Parliament after elections. This is due to the requirements for contesting elections and those of taking up a seat in Parliament. Questions have been raised about Zuma's plans to run for president and his future plans in the political sphere. Political analyst Asanda Ngoasheng joins us for more. Asanda, good afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. I want to start with the MK Party's reaction to the IEC decision. The IEC saying it's approaching the Constitutional Court for clarity on Section 47(1)(e) of the Constitution. As far as former President Jacob Zuma's party is concerned, the IEC is playing politics. There's absolutely no reason why it should be doing this. It should just be accepting the Electoral Court's ruling.
Well, I mean, I'm not surprised that the MK would say that. It's very much on brand that they would say that. But what they need to understand is that this particular decision doesn't only affect Jacob Zuma, it has implications for South Africa's democracy and how we deal with people who have been charged as criminals and who have been to prison, and their right to be able to stand for election, to be able to hold essentially their highest position. And it can't be something that we now don't interrogate at the level of the Constitutional Court just because it's Jacob Zuma and there's a fear that is going to be seen as playing politics. And I've been saying, since the beginning of this MK versus ANC situation, that a lot of people who are supposed to be acting are dropping the ball because they keep seeing this as the MK versus the ANC, whereas a lot of what's happening is actually, in effect, a challenge on South Africa's democracy. It's a challenge on various, aspects of South Africa's constitution, and it's a challenge on how South Africa will be able to deal with political parties in the future. And this is starting from Khanyile and the things that he was saying, making statements as the Youth League leader, then saying if Jacob Zuma is not on that ballot, then there will be no election in South Africa, which is effectively inciting violence and very problematic, first of all, in this election kind of campaign period, but also much critically problematic when you think about the fact that he is already out on bail pending charges that he's facing for his alleged involvement in July 2021, and the charges are also incitement of violence. And so you have somebody who's out on bail for one crime and is now out, and basically essentially committing the same crime. And so we need to understand that there are points and moments in this tough political contestation where the law is going to have to be brought in, the constitution is going to have to be brought in, because the whole point of the law is that nobody is above the law. And so we can't have special compensations because it's Zuma, because there are fears of how the MK is going to respond. Everything of this nature has to be contested at the level of the Constitutional Court, because that is the level at which these decisions are going to have an impact.
Well, obviously, this is not something I've put to the MK Party itself, but I can see them or hear them saying, look, we don't support violence. That's precisely why we suspended and demoted Khanyile, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't forcefully raise issues around the IEC, for example, which they believe, as I said, is involving itself in the political field of play, and this is not about justice.
So I think, Khanyile is not the only person who could be charged with incitement of violence. There are various other members of the political party that have made similar statements. He maybe made the most inflammatory, but he wasn't the only one that has been making those statements. And as I've said earlier, we have a situation where a level of fear has been created around people's ability to critique what is or isn't legal, precisely because of the threats of violence that have already been experienced. And so there's a level and a point at which MK has already sown the seeds of fear, which is the opposite of what political parties are supposed to do in the context of a democracy and in a context of a country where, competition and, being able to stand for opposition or for the majority party and contesting elections vigorously is allowed. Since 1994, South Africa is a country where different people have been allowed their freedom, to say what they need to say and to recruit as many people as they want. That's why we have, at some point it was 300 and at last check it was about 150 people and political parties on the ballot, precisely because we're a country that understands and appreciates competition. But as with anything, every right has a responsibility, and they have been irresponsible, as far as I'm concerned, with the freedom of speech right that we do have, and they haven't considered their implication, which is that, as I've said, many of the utterances have already led to a culture of fear around being critical of Jacob Zuma, around being critical of the MK and everything that it stands for, which is the opposite of what this country stands for.
Now, irrespective of what the law says and who may be right and who may be wrong, politically, could this move by the IEC, and again, as Mr. Majavo was saying, it shouldn't matter what the politicians think. But now, you and I are talking politics now and not the law. Could this move by the IEC give credence to the former president's claims that he is being persecuted? What applies to other people in similar situations doesn't apply to him. You would have seen him a couple of days ago outside court making a similar claim, saying what applies to him doesn't seem to apply to people like the sitting president. Could it help? Could this help bolster his campaign is really the question I'm asking.
Well, Zuma is one man who trades in being a victim, and he's done that, if we remember back in 2007, in the run-up to 2008, that is what he was doing. He was painting himself as a victim and painting the former president, Thabo Mbeki, as, an evil man, a sly man who was trying to prevent him from ascending to the highest office in South Africa. And, that tactic seemed to be, successful at that point in time. But I don't know if that tactic is going to work this time around, because people know the tactic, they've seen the tactic, and they're aware of the tactic. There may be elements of South African population who might fall for it, but I think on average South Africans are actually quite politically literate, and they do understand that, if you are a former president, your actions actually have meaning beyond just what the actions of an ordinary member of society would have, and you actually do get held up to a higher standard because of the office that you hold or the office that you used to hold. And even from a, outside of the law, from a political philosophy perspective, South Africa's democracy is made up of three arms of the state, and one of those arms is the legislature, which is parliament. The other arm is the executive, which is the ministers and the president, and then the third arm is the judiciary, which is the legal system and the courts of South Africa. And the very job of the judiciary is to actually hold those in power and to ensure that there are checks and balances between the judiciary, between the legislature and the executive, and that everybody who is in power is still acting at different points according to the letter of the law. And in fact, our problem in this country is that often when the judiciary interferes and makes, judgments that seem to be aligned with certain political desires, we automatically assume they're doing that because they're entering the political fray, and we forget that it is literally their role to oversee and to ensure that there are checks and balances. And so when the Constitutional Court takes this case on, which it will have to, it will be acting in its role as the Constitutional Court, the final body, the final deciding body on what is or isn't legal under our constitutional order. And without us being able to do that, we stop being a constitutional democracy. Because what makes us a constitutional democracy is precisely the fact that when we are unhappy as ordinary citizens or people in power, we can take things for final decision by the Constitutional Court. And that is the only court that can declare whether, former President Jacob Zuma can stand, cannot stand, and also can decide whether, if indeed he does become an MP, can he then be elected to be president, considering he's already served the 2 terms or not. And we can't have any other court or any other, system make these decisions, because, as I said, it's not just about Jacob Zuma. People must remember, for instance, that Tony Ngeni's career was basically decimated, and he was stuck at Lutuli House after he was charged and went to prison because of, these very same laws. And there are many others within the ANC whose careers have kind of been curtailed by this, this particular law. And so all of those people have the potential of coming back and saying, well, hang on, you can't rule in this way on this guy when you ruled in that way in my case. We cannot have a situation where somebody is able to, be facing widespread allegations of corruption, a whole Zondo commission, and allegations of basically bankrupting the state, then being able to leave and then come back a couple of years later to come back and do the same thing to us. That is absolutely unacceptable, and it is unsafe for South Africans, and it is unethical to my mind for a person of that nature to even think of this. And to me, it shows the level of selfishness and the level of not caring about South Africans that our former president has consistently displayed, where he consistently is more interested in fulfilling his own desires, even if it's at the expense of South Africa and South Africa's democracy and the dignity of the official, institutions that we have, which we need to be standing, and we need to be constantly able to withstand scrutiny. But he has, ever since he's been in power, he has consistently challenged the Constitution. He has consistently challenged every other ethical law that we've ever put in place for anybody that is in office. That is a fact. At this point, I was joking to somebody that Jacob Zuma is going to need his own, law course, because he has challenged so many of our democratic foundational principles and our understanding of who is supposed to be in office and whether we can or can't implicitly trust somebody who's in office, and the kind of powers that they should and shouldn't be allowed to have.
Asanda, very, very briefly, we've run out of time, but I have to ask you this, because outside of this going in and out of court, whether it's these IEC matters or whether it is private prosecution or intention to privately prosecute Willie Downer and Karen Moon, he spoke the other day of something that is clearly troubling him, and that's now the baby that he has given birth to. The MK party, there are people, he says, who are being opportunistic, who want to top lists and who are creating chaos within the party. How do you think that is going to pan out, and how will it affect his running of the party?
I'm not surprised that we're already sitting at these, these kind of conditions, because these are the conditions that he created. These are the type of people that he was attracting. You'll remember that as the list of names of MK people were coming out, people were asking questions about their moral credence. So, for instance, there are people on there who are rape accused, who are in fact busy with court cases of rape that are incomplete. And a lot of the characters that are within the MK are facing different kinds of allegations, a lot of them allegations that have to do with July 2021 and the riots that were orchestrated there, and the fact that more than 300 people died, and the country, not just the KZN, the country lost 50 billion rands and more. And so I'm not surprised that the people who are within this political party are leaving a lot to be desired, and that he's having a tough time, because that's the kind of person that he is, and that's the kind of person that he's going to attract. And that, I think, is one of the things that those who want to vote for him and the whole crew of the MK need to be able to consider and ask themselves, is this the kind of leadership that they want to have? And are these the kind of people that they want to forge a future for South Africa, gun-wielding, people who are fighting for positions?
Well, we'll see what comes out of that situation. Clearly, the former president unimpressed by the behavior of some of the MK party's members, but there are others who take it further to even suggest a theory that the party may well be infiltrated by ANC, people who want to disturb or who want to make sure that the party doesn't grow and get to achieve what they believe it can achieve. The story, of course, continues. Asanda Ngoasheng, political analyst, giving us her views there.